Chapter 11 of Green Mansions. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. Green Mansions by W. H. Hudson. Chapter 11. There was a welcome change in the weather when I rose early next morning. The sky was without cloud and had that purity in its color and look of infinite distance seen only when the atmosphere is free from vapor. The sun had not yet risen, but old Nuflo was already among the ashes, on his hands and knees, blowing the embers he had uncovered to a flame. Then Rima appeared, only to pass through the room with quick light tread to go out of the door without a word or even a glance at my face. The old man, after watching at the door for a few minutes, turned and began eagerly questioning me about my adventures on the previous evening. In reply, I related to him how the girl had found me in the forest, lost and unable to extricate myself from the tangled undergrowth. He rubbed his hands on his knees and chuckled. "Happy are you, senor," he said, "that my granddaughter regards you with such friendly eyes. Otherwise you might have perished before morning. Once she was at your side, no light, whether of sun or moon or lantern, was needed, nor that small instrument which is said to guide a man aright in the desert, even in the darkest night. Let him that can believe such a thing." "Yes, happy for me," I returned. "I am filled with remorse that it was all through my fault that the poor child was exposed to such weather." "Oh, senor," he cried airily, "let not that distress you. Rain and wind and hot suns, from which we seek shelter, do not harm her. She takes no cold and no fever, with or without ague." After some further conversation, I left him to steal away unobserved on his own account, and set out for a ramble in the hope of encountering Rima and winning her to talk to me. My quest did not succeed. Not a glimpse of her delicate shadowy form did I catch among the trees, and not one note from her melodious lips came to gladden me. At noon I returned to the house, where I found food placed ready for me, and knew that she had come there during my absence and had not been forgetful of my wants. "Shall I thank you for this?" I said. "I ask you for heavenly nectar for the sustentation of the higher winged nature in me, and you give me a boiled sweet potato, toasted strips of sun-dried pumpkins, and a handful of parched maize. Rima, Rima, my woodland fairy, my sweet saviour, why do you yet fear me? Is it that love struggles in you with repugnance? Can you discern with clear spiritual eyes the grosser elements in me, and hate them? Or has some false imagination made me appear all dark and evil, but too late for your peace, after the sweet sickness of love has infected you?" But she was not there to answer me, and so after a time I went forth again and seated myself listlessly on the root of an old tree not far from the house. I had sat there a full hour, when all at once Rima appeared at my side. Bending forward, she touched my hand, but without glancing at my face. "Come with me," she said, and turning, moved swiftly towards the northern extremity of the forest. She seemed to take it for granted that I would follow, never casting a look behind, nor pausing in her rapid walk, but I was only too glad to obey, and, starting up, was quickly after her. She led me by easy ways, familiar to her, with many doublings to escape the undergrowth, never speaking or pausing until we came out from the thick forest, and I found myself for the first time on the foot of the great hill or mountain Itaioa. Glancing back for a few moments, she waved a hand towards the summit, and then at once began the ascent. Here too it seemed all familiar ground to her. From below, the sides had presented an exceedingly rugged appearance, a wild confusion of huge jagged rocks, mixed with a tangled vegetation of trees, bushes, and vines. But following her in all her doublings, it became easy enough, although it fatigued me greatly owing to our rapid pace. The hill was conical, but I found that it had a flat top, an oblong or pear-shaped area, almost level, of a soft, crumbly sandstone, with a few blocks and boulders of a harder stone scattered about, and no vegetation except the grey mountain lichen and a few sere-looking dwarf shrubs. Here Rima, at a distance of a few yards from me, remained standing still for some minutes, as if to give me time to recover my breath, and I was right glad to sit down on a stone to rest. Finally she walked slowly to the centre of the level area, which was about 2 acres in extent. Rising, I followed her and climbed on to a huge block of stone, began gazing at the wide prospect spread out before me. The day was windless and bright, with only a few white clouds floating at a great height above and casting travelling shadows over that wild broken country, where forest, marsh, and savanna were only distinguishable by their different colours, like the greys and greens and yellows on a map. At a great distance the circle of the horizon was broken here and there by mountains, but the hills in our neighbourhood were all beneath our feet. After gazing all round for some minutes, I jumped down from my stand, and, leaning against the stone, stood watching the girl, waiting for her to speak. I felt convinced that she had something of the very highest importance, to herself, to communicate, and that only the pressing need of a confidant, not Nuflo, had overcome her shyness of me, and I determined to let her take her own time to say it in her own way. For a while she continued silent, her face averted, but her little movements and the way she clasped and unclasped her fingers showed that she was anxious and her mind working. Suddenly, half turning to me, she began speaking eagerly and rapidly. "Do you see?" she said, waving her hand to indicate the whole circuit of earth. "How large it is! Look!" pointing now to mountains in the west. "Those are the Vahanas. 1, 2, 3, the highest. I can tell you their names. Vahana Chara, Chumi, Aranoa. Do you see that water? It is a river called Guayapero. From the hills it comes down. Inaruna is their name, and you can see them there in the south, far, far." And in this way she went on pointing out and naming all the mountains and rivers within sight. Then she suddenly dropped her hands to her sides and continued, "That is all, because we can see no further. But the world is larger than that. Other mountains, other rivers. Have I not told you of Voa, on the river Voa, where I was born, where Mother died, where the priest taught me years ago? All that you cannot see, it is so far away, so far." I did not laugh at her simplicity, nor did I smile or feel any inclination to smile. On the contrary, I only experienced a sympathy so keen that it was like pain, while watching her clouded face, so changeful in its expression, yet in all changes so wistful. I could not yet form any idea as to what she wished to communicate or to discover, but seeing that she paused for a reply, I answered, "The world is so large, Rima, that we can only see a very small portion of it from any one spot. Look at this," and with a stick I had used to aid me in my ascent, I traced a circle 6 or 7 inches in circumference on the soft stone, and in its centre placed a small pebble. "This represents the mountain we are standing on," I continued, touching the pebble, "and this line encircling it encloses all the earth we can see from the mountain top. Do you understand? The line I have traced is the blue line of the horizon beyond which we cannot see, and outside of this little circle is all the flat top of Itaioa, representing the world. Consider, then, how small a portion of the world we can see from this spot." "And do you know it all?" she returned excitedly. "All the world?" waving her hands to indicate the little stone plain. "All the mountains and rivers and forests, all the people in the world?" "That would be impossible, Rima. Consider how large it is." "That does not matter. Come, let us go together, we two and grandfather, and see all the world, all the mountains and forests, and know all the people." "You do not know what you are saying, Rima. You might as well say, 'Come, let us go to the sun and find out everything in it.'"
It is you who do not know what you are saying, she retorted, with brightening eyes which for a moment glanced full into mine. We have no wings like birds to fly to the sun. Am I not able to walk on the earth and run? Can I not swim? Can I not climb every mountain?
No, you cannot. You imagine that all the earth is like this little portion you see, but it is not all the same. There are great rivers which you cannot cross by swimming, mountains you cannot climb, forests you cannot penetrate, dark and inhabited by dangerous beasts, and so vast that all this space your eyes look on is a mere speck of earth in comparison. She listened excitedly.
Oh, do you know all that?
She cried, and with a strangely brightening look, and then half turning from me, she added with sudden petulance,
Yet only a minute ago you knew nothing of the world, because it is so large. Is anything to be gained by speaking to one who says such contrary things?
I explained that I had not contradicted myself, that she had not rightly interpreted my words. I knew, I said, something about the principal features of the different countries of the world, as, for instance, the largest mountain ranges and rivers and the cities. Also something, but very little, about the tribes of savage men. She heard me with impatience, which made me speak rapidly, in very general terms, and to simplify the matter I made the world stand for the continent we were in. It seemed idle to go beyond that, and her eagerness would not have allowed it.
Tell me all you know, she said the moment I ceased speaking. What is there, and there, and there? Pointing in various directions. Rivers and forests, they are nothing to me. The villages, the tribes, the people everywhere. Tell me, for I must know it all.
It would take long to tell, Rima.
Because you are so slow. Look how high the sun is. Speak, speak. What is there?
Pointing to the north. All that country, I said, waving my hands from east to west, is Guyana, and so large it is that you could go in this direction or in this, traveling for months, without seeing the end of Guyana. Still it would be Guyana, rivers, 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 with forests between, and other forests and rivers beyond, and savage people, nations, and tribes. Guayahibo, Aguaricoto, Ayano, Maco, Piaroa, Quiriquiripo, Tuparito. Shall I name 100 more? It would be useless, Rima. They are all savages, and live widely scattered in the forests, hunting with bow and arrow and the zabatana. Consider, then, how large Guyana is.
Guyana, Guyana! Do I not know all this is Guyana? But beyond and beyond and beyond, is there no end to Guyana?
Yes. There northwards it ends at the Orinoco, a mighty river, coming from mighty mountains, compared with which Itaoa is like a stone on the ground on which we have sat down to rest. You must know that Guyana is only a portion, a half of our country, Venezuela. Look, I continued, putting my hand round my shoulder to touch the middle of my back. There is a groove running down my spine, dividing my body into equal parts. Thus does the great Orinoco divide Venezuela, and on one side of it is all Guyana, and on the other side the countries or provinces of Cumana, Maturm, Barcelona, Bolivar, Guarico, Apure, and many others. I then gave a rapid description of the northern half of the country, with its vast llanos, covered with herds in one part, its plantations of coffee, rice, and sugar cane in another, and its chief towns. Last of all, Caracas, the gay and opulent little Paris in America. This seemed to weary her, but the moment I ceased speaking, and before I could well moisten my dry lips, she demanded to know what came after Caracas, after all Venezuela. The ocean, water, 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 I replied.
There are no people there in the water, only fishes, she remarked, then suddenly continued, Why are you silent? Is Venezuela, then, all the world? The task I had set myself to perform seemed only at its commencement yet. Thinking how to proceed with it, my eyes roved over the level area we were standing on, and it struck me that this little irregular plain,
broad at one end and almost pointed at the other, roughly resembled the South American continent in its form. "Look, Rima," I began, "here we are on this small pebble, Itaioa, and this line round it shuts us in. We cannot see beyond. Now let us imagine that we can see beyond, that we can see the whole flat mountain top, and that, you know, is the whole world. Now listen while I tell you of all the countries and principal mountains and rivers and cities of the world." The plan I had now fixed on involved a great deal of walking about and some hard work in moving and setting up stones and tracing boundary and other lines. But it gave me pleasure, for Rima was close by all the time, following me from place to place, listening to all I said in silence but with keen interest. At the broad end of the level summit I marked out Venezuela, showing by means of a long line how the Orinoco divided it, and also marking several of the greater streams flowing into it. I also marked the sites of Caracas and other large towns with stones, and rejoiced that we are not like the Europeans, great city builders, for the stones proved heavy to lift. Then followed Colombia and Ecuador on the west, and, successively, Bolivia, Peru, Chile, ending at last in the south with Patagonia, a cold, arid land, bleak and desolate. I marked the littoral cities as we progressed on that side, where earth ends and the Pacific Ocean begins, and infinitude. Then, in a sudden burst of inspiration, I described the Cordilleras to her, that world-long, stupendous chain, its sea of Titicaca, and wintry, desolate Paramo, where lie the ruins of Tiahuanaco, older than Thebes. I mentioned its principal cities, those small inflamed or festering pimples that attract much attention from appearing on such a body. Quito, called, not in irony but by its own people, the splendid and the magnificent, so high above the earth as to appear but a little way removed from heaven, de Quito al cielo, as the saying is. But of its sublime history, its kings and conquerors, Hamar Capac the mighty, and Huascar, and Atahualpa the unhappy, not one word. Many words, how inadequate, of the summits, white with everlasting snows, above it, above this navel of the world, above the earth, the ocean, the darkening tempest, the condor's flight. Flame-breathing Cotopaxi, whose wrathful mutterings are audible 200 leagues away, and Chimborazo, Antisana, Sarata, Illimani, Aconcagua, names of mountains that affect us like the names of gods, implacable Pajacamac and Viracocha, whose everlasting granite thrones they are. At the last I showed her Cuzco, the city of the sun, and the highest dwelling place of man on earth. I was carried away by so sublime a theme, and remembering that I had no critical hearer, I gave free reins to fancy, forgetting for the moment that some undiscovered thought or feeling had prompted her questions. And while I spoke of the mountains, she hung on my words, following me closely in my walk, her countenance brilliant, her frame quivering with excitement. There yet remained to be described all that unimaginable space east of the Andes, the rivers, what rivers, the green plains that are like the sea, the illimitable waste of water where there is no land, and the forest region. The very thought of the Amazonian forest made my spirit droop. If I could have snatched her up and placed her on the dome of Chimborazo, she would have looked on an area of 10,000 square miles of earth, so vast is the horizon at that elevation. And possibly her imagination would have been able to clothe it all with an unbroken forest. Yet how small a portion this would be of a stupendous whole, of a forest region equal in extent to the whole of Europe. All loveliness, all grace, all majesty are there, but we cannot see, cannot conceive. Come away. From this vast stage, to be occupied in the distant future by millions and myriads of beings, like us of upright form, the nations that will be born when all the existing dominant races on the globe and the civilizations they represent have perished as utterly as those who sculptured the stones of old Tiahuanaco. From this theatre of palms prepared for a drama unlike any which the immortals have yet witnessed, I hurried away, and then slowly conducted her along the Atlantic coast, listening to the thunder of its great waves, and pausing at intervals to survey some maritime city. Never probably since old Father Noah divided the earth among his sons had so grand a geographical discourse been delivered, and having finished I sat down, exhausted with my efforts, and mopped my brow, but glad that my huge task was over, and satisfied that I had convinced her of the futility of her wish to see the world for herself. Her excitement had passed away by now. She was standing a little apart from me, her eyes cast down and thoughtful. At length she approached me, and said, waving her hand all around, "What is beyond the mountains over there, beyond the cities on that side, beyond the world?" "Water, only water. Did I not tell you?" I returned stoutly, for I had of course sunk the Isthmus of Panama beneath the sea. "Water, all round?" she persisted. "Yes." "Water, and no beyond. Only water, always water." I could no longer adhere to so gross a lie. She was too intelligent, and I loved her too much. Standing up, I pointed to distant mountains and isolated peaks. "Look at those peaks," I said. "It is like that with the world. This world we are standing on, beyond that great water that flows all round the world, but far away, so far that it would take months in a big boat to reach them. There are islands, some small, others as large as this world. But, Rima, they are so far away, so impossible to reach, that it is useless to speak or to think of them. They are to us like the sun and moon and stars, to which we cannot fly. And now sit down and rest by my side, for you know everything." She glanced at me with troubled eyes. "Nothing do I know. Nothing have you told me. Did I not say that mountains and rivers and forests are nothing? Tell me about all the people in the world. Look, there is Cuzco over there, a city like no other in the world. Did you not tell me so? Of the people, nothing. Are they also different from all others in the world?" "I will tell you that if you will first answer me one question, Rima." She drew a little nearer, curious to hear, but was silent. "Promise that you will answer me," I persisted, and as she continued silent, I added, "Shall I not ask you, then?" "Say," she murmured. "Why do you wish to know about the people of Cuzco?" She flashed a look at me, then averted her face. For some moments she stood hesitating, then coming closer, touched me on the shoulder, and said softly, "Turn away. Do not look at me." I obeyed, and bending so close that I felt her warm breath on my neck, she whispered, "Are the people in Cuzco like me? Would they understand me, the things you cannot understand? Do you know?" Her tremulous voice betrayed her agitation, and her words, I imagined, revealed the motive of her action in bringing me to the summit of Itaoa, and of her desire to visit and know all the various peoples inhabiting the world. She had begun to realize, after knowing me, her isolation and unlikeness to others, and at the same time to dream that all human beings might not be unlike her, and unable to understand her mysterious speech, and to enter into her thoughts and feelings. "I can answer that question, Rima," I said. "Ha, no, poor child. There are none there like you, not one, not one. Of all there, priests, soldiers, merchants, workmen, white, black, red, and mixed, men and women, old and young, rich and poor, ugly and beautiful, not one would understand the sweet language you speak." She said nothing, and glancing round, I discovered that she was walking away, her fingers clasped before her, her eyes cast down, and looking profoundly dejected. Jumping up, I hurried after her. "Listen," I said, coming to her side. "Do you know that there are others in the world like you who would understand your speech?"
Oh, do I not? Yes, Mother told me. I was young when you died, but oh, Mother, why did you not tell me more?
But where?
Oh, do you not think that I would go to them if I knew? That I would ask?
Does Nuflo know? She shook her head, walking dejectedly along. But have you asked him? I persisted.
Have I not? Not once, not 100 times.
Suddenly she paused.
Look, she said. Now we are standing in Guiana again, and over there is Brazil, and up there towards the Cordilleras it is unknown, and there are people there. Come, let us go and seek for my mother's people in that place, with grandfather, but not the dogs. They would frighten the animals and betray us by barking to cruel men who would slay us with poisoned arrows.
Oh, Rima, can you not understand? It is too far, and your grandfather, poor old man, would die of weariness and hunger and old age in some strange forest.
Would he die? Old grandfather? Then we could cover him up with palm leaves in the forest and leave him. It would not be grandfather, only his body that must turn to dust. He would be away, away where the stars are. We should not die, but go on and on and on.
To continue the discussion seemed hopeless. I was silent, thinking of what I had heard, that there were others like her somewhere in that vast green world, so much of it imperfectly known, so many districts never yet explored by white men. True, it was strange that no report of such a race had reached the ears of any traveler, yet here was Rima herself at my side, a living proof that such a race did exist. Nuflo probably knew more than he would say. I had failed, as we had seen, to win the secret from him by fair means, and could not have recourse to foul, the rack and thumbscrew, to wring it from him. To the Indians she was only an object of superstitious fear, a daughter of the Didi, and to them nothing of her origin was known. And she, poor girl, had only a vague remembrance of a few words heard in childhood from her mother, and probably not rightly understood. While these thoughts had been passing through my mind, Rima had been standing silent by, waiting perhaps for an answer to her last words. Then, stooping, she picked up a small pebble and tossed it 3 or 4 yards away.
Do you see where it fell?
She cried, turning towards me.
That is on the border of Guiana, is it not? Let us go there first.
Rima, how you distress me! We cannot go there. It is all a savage wilderness, almost unknown to men, a blank on the map.
The map. Speak no word that I do not understand.
In a very few words I explained my meaning. Even fewer would have sufficed, so quick was her apprehension.
If it is a blank, she returned quickly, then you know of nothing to stop us, no river we cannot swim, and no great mountains like those where Quito is.
But I happen to know, Rima, for it has been related to me by old Indians, that of all places that is the most difficult of access. There is a river there, and although it is not on the map, it would prove more impassable to us than the mighty Orinoco and Amazon. It has vast malarious swamps on its borders, overgrown with dense forest, teeming with savage and venomous animals, so that even the Indians dare not venture near it. And even before the river is reached, there is a range of precipitous mountains called by the same name, just there where your pebble fell, the mountains of Riolama. Hardly had the name fallen from my lips before a change, swift as lightning, came over her countenance. All doubt, anxiety, petulance, hope, and despondence, and these in ever-varying degrees, chasing each other's like shadows, had vanished, and she was instinct and burning with some new powerful emotion which had flashed into her soul.
Riolama, Riolama,
she repeated so rapidly and in a tone so sharp that it tingled in the brain.
That is the place I am seeking. There was my mother found. There are her people and mine. Therefore was I called Riolama. That is my name.
Rima, I returned, astonished at her words.
No, 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 Riolama. When I was a child and the priest baptized me, he named me Riolama, the place where my mother was found. but it was long to say, and they call me Rima."
Suddenly she became still, and then cried in a ringing voice,
"And he knew it all along, that old man! He knew that Riolama was near, only there where the pebble fell, that we could go there."
While speaking, she turned towards her home, pointing with raised hand. Her whole appearance now reminded me of that first meeting with her when the serpent bit me. The soft red of her irises shone like fire, her delicate skin seemed to glow with an intense rose colour, and her frame trembled with her agitation, so that her loose cloud of hair was in motion as if blown through by wind.
"Traitor! Traitor!"
she cried, still looking homewards and using quick, passionate gestures.
"It was all known to you, and you deceived me all these years. Even to me, Rima, you lied with your lips. Oh, horrible! Was there ever such a scandal known in Guayana? Come, follow me. Let us go at once to Riolama."
And without so much as casting a glance behind to see whether I followed or no, she hurried away, and in a couple of minutes disappeared from sight over the edge of the flat summit. "Rima! Rima! Come back and listen to me! Oh, you are mad! Come back! Come back!" But she would not return or pause and listen, and looking after her I saw her bounding down the rocky slope like some wild, agile creature, possessed of padded hoofs and an infallible instinct, and before many minutes she vanished from sight among rocks and trees lower down. "Nuflo, old man," said I, looking out towards his lodge, "are there no shooting pains in those old bones of yours to warn you in time of the tempest about to burst on your head?" Then I sat down to think. End of chapter.